Hi, welcome everyone to this virtual tour of WhereScape Automation. My name is Duan Uys. I am a solutions architect and have been a data professional with over a decade of experience building software solutions and data warehouses for clients across a wide range of industries, from finance to healthcare and beyond. And today I'm thrilled to guide you through a journey where we will explore how WhereScape RED and Snowflake's Cortex AI can work together to create data and to create a chatbot that lets us interact with our data in a very conversational way. So whether you're a data professional, a business leader, or simply curious about data automation, this session will show you how we can make data accessible and powerful. So without further ado, let's dive in. In 2024, every competitive organization knows that data is the key to success. Accurate, reliable data helps companies spot trends, write complex queries, and really just create reports that drive smart decisions. And as the Cloudera blog points out, right, data-driven companies are 23 times more likely to attract new customers and 19 times more likely to be profitable. But with data growing in volume and complexity, it truly does bring new risks and challenges. And that's where automation comes in to help to manage it all effectively. So, what exactly is data automation? According to the Data Warehouse Institute, it's about using technology to boost efficiency and effectiveness in data warehousing processes. It's not just automating development. It covers everything from design and testing to deployment, operations, impact analysis, and change management. And at WhereScape, we specialize in this kind of automation to make your data workflow smoother and more reliable. Today, with more data pouring in from multiple sources, we are dealing with a conflicting code languages, model sets, and operational systems. And this often leads to unreliable data and inaccurate reporting. Here are some of the key challenges, right? Just purely the sheer volume of data that makes it so hard to find enough staff to handle it all the time. Another challenge is technologies and businesses' needs, they shift. And so companies end up changing data systems every 5 to 7 years, turning migrations really into a constant headache. You have manual coding, it's time consuming, just really not feasible for anyone anymore. Debugging and testing and reworking takes up a huge amount of effort. And did you know that 75% of developers' time is spent debugging? And also the time and costs to maintain a reliable data infrastructure are skyrocketing. Building modern data warehouses can take months to years. And let's face it, data warehouse projects are some of the riskiest IT endeavors, and even well-planned ones, and I've seen this personally in my professional career as well. Well-planned ones often fail due to the complexity around it. And honestly, that is where WhereScape RED truly comes in. Once your design is set, WhereScape RED automates the entire development process, from generating code to the orchestration. It turns your design into a really fully operational data warehouse with minimal manual work, slashing time and reducing errors. And at the core product from WhereScape, RED is all about making data warehousing faster, more efficient, scalable, especially with integrations like Snowflake. And here we're taking a little bit of a deeper dive into the architecture of RED, right? As illustrated in this overview diagram, right? It starts from the left with data sources, including the internal, external model, existing and retrofit objects. And it goes into our loading. So this is our entire ETL pipeline. We load data, we transform it, and it lives in a data foundation. You're not beholden to any sort of form of architecture. And then from that foundation, you start building however your reporting layer would look like, whether you're following a very formal analytical platform or analytical architecture like star schemas or data vaults or Inman style, or just something a little bit more of a hybrid. Our tool allows you to build all of that without much effort at all. And on top of that, on top of that, right, we have our metadata. It was all a metadata-driven capability or tool. We have automate the documentation process. It comes with a built-in scheduler. You can retrofit objects, which essentially means importing existing objects and tables and entities in an already established data warehouse so that RED manages all of that. And this, honestly, I could stay on this slide for a very, very long time, but I really wanted to get to the meat of all this, which is our hands-on demonstration of how we can actually get these tools to work with Cortex and get some really cool stuff going. But before we do that, right, but to complement some of WhereScape RED, right, we're pairing it with Snowflake Cortex AI. And this diagram shown here really just breaks down the Cortex's comprehensive architecture into some of the key layers. And ultimately, what we are going to be focusing on today is creating what's called a Cortex Search agent. And then in this data layer, we will be building this search engine on top of an already not already, but a created data set that we have built using WhereScape RED to then build out our chatbot on top of it. And then finally, just wanted to let everyone know, right? We have been in the industry for a very, very long time. WhereScape has been around for the last 25 years. We operate globally and have clients all over the world, and we are trusted by more than 1,000 customers worldwide. And as you can see from these logos of some of the leading companies and organizations across the industries, they all rely on WhereScape for their data automation needs. From tech giants to healthcare providers, our solutions deliver truly real results. And to add some cherries on top of that cake, at the end of the day, we are platform agnostic. So our tool can work on any of the popular platforms on there, from Databricks, Snowflake, Fabric, SQL, on-prem, in the cloud, behind very restricted intranets, whatever the case may be. We are there to support you. And honestly, we've had, to be honest, companies do often overhaul their data platforms about every 5 to 7 years to keep up with, current trends, to keep up with security, keep up with technology. But truly, with WhereScape, you get that complete versatility. And if you need to switch platforms, the transition can be done in as little as 5 days. Honestly, this flexibility ensures that your data infrastructure is future-proof no matter where your tech stack falls. And so, last call before we get our hands a little bit dirty. But if you're interested in learning more about WhereScape data automation, please visit the link provided on the screen, wherescape.com/request a demo to schedule a personalized session for you. So thank you for joining this introductory part of our virtual tour. Now let's move on to the live demonstration where I will show you WhereScape RED in action, curating data, and followed by building a chatbot with Snowflake Cortex AI. And get ready to see how easy it is to talk to your data. Now, as we get into getting our hands dirty and actually showing you how everything's been built out and how quickly and easy it was, I just wanted to also just provide some additional information during the course of this, and especially when we get to Snowflake. In all actuality, what we're going to be creating within Snowflake itself is what's called a Streamlit app. And that Streamlit app has some specific Python code that allows us to tap into the models that we've created and then be able to display the user interface as a quick demo, so to speak, for our chatbot. And during that code and that material will also be attached to the landing page of this virtual tour. So feel free to explore that and download that at your leisure. And so you can try it out for yourself. But to begin, right, what we're seeing right here in front of us is really the layout, is going to be the layout of WhereScape RED, right? This is our builder tool again, and this is where all the magic actually happens. And a very good way to visualize what we're looking at, right? At the end of the day, WhereScape RED is an abstraction layer that lives on top of a target database. Now, for simplicity and just for the virtual tour purposes today, we are actually pulling data in from a Snowflake instance, which just happens to be the exact same instance of where we're pushing all this data to as well. But in reality, that source can be from anything. It can be from Postgres, it can be from APIs, flat files, Microsoft SQL, Azure SQL, Fabric, Oracle, Databricks, whatever the case may be. And that's what we're going to be pulling in today. We're going to be pulling in some raw information and show you just exactly the kind of data set that we're creating. So to start off, before I get into the sort of the layout of the land here, it's always good to understand exactly what we're building towards. And the example data set that we're working with today is data around books, a book data set. So we have information about titles and how those books relates to authors, right? How authors and categories, subcategories, the publishers behind those. And each of these data comes in kind of a piecemeal perspective, right? We have a different data set that relates to subcategories and categories, publishers and books itself. And we're going to be ingesting all of those, or we have ingested all of those piecemeal, right, as it was given to us. And then through RED, we've essentially created a staging table, which is an intermediate working table where we've essentially combined all of this data together, which we have then on top of that created a finalized data set. And this is actually not the end product. As we'll see, there's an additional step to this. But going back to that architectural diagram that we spoke about a little bit earlier, this would represent the foundational aspect, right? The foundational data set, right? You curate and gather all your sources and you push it into some sort of foundation. And it's always good to just see a diagram of what we're working towards. And we have all of these different data. We're bringing it into load tables, which are essentially temporary staging tables. And then we're pushing that into our working tables and then finally into our DS tables, which we call data stores. Another word for these where data stores can be related to operational data stores, persistent staging areas, whatever the case may be. And RED makes it very, very easy to define what kind of tables you want those to be, whether they are update inserts types, whether they are historically tracking, whether you want to flush and fill them, or whether you want to incrementally or what's called delta loading or incremental loading. All right. So to start off, a little bit of the lay of the land. Again, this is our RED builder tool, and there are four aspects, or really, what am I saying? Yeah, four major aspects to the UI. Here on the left-hand side, we have a concept of what's called objects, and each object within RED itself represents something within a database. So in Snowflake's context, we have load tables, which play a very specific role. We have staging tables, which also play a very specific role. We have data stores, and there are many, many more objects. In fact, I can quickly just show you the amount of objects that we support. And I think even in this instance right here, I have some that are hidden out of view, just so I don't clutter up the screen. But we offer out of the gate support for Data Vault, architectures, Kimball, Inmin style, which is Snowflake or your third normalized forms, et cetera, et cetera. And we have a bunch of other objects itself. But more importantly here, we have our Cortex manual today. So just like that diagram showed, we have a series of load tables, staging tables, and data stores, and a data store that we brought in to create it. Now we do have more than one data store, as you'll see after we've created our operational data store itself that consists of the data of the books information. We're going to create a very specific subset of that, which we will then use to create the Cortex engine. And then, as always, we actually have the Cortex service right here that we can show, that we can actually manage within RED itself. So we have the ability to manage Cortex systems, services as well within RED. So being able to bring in data into RED is really simple. Now I have done all of this already, purely just because of the time constraints that we have with our virtual tours. And again, please feel free to schedule a demo or attend one of our longer sessions to kind of see this stuff in action. But ultimately, we have the abilities, some great abilities, to be able to go in and browse our source. Now this is the actual source data set or the source system that we're bringing in all of our data for, right? We have authors, there's the books, categories, and publishers. Now, theoretically, again, this can live on any system that we want. And we have the ability to come in directly within RED itself to be able to view the columns, view the data. What this does is it taps into that source system, and we're able to actually see that data live without having to log in to an existing sort of SQL client, right? Whether that's dbeaver or Snowsight or whatever the case may be. And being able to bring in data, as you can see, as we can see within our load tables, we have brought in all of these, authors, books, categories, publishers, and subcategories. And by doing that, it was as simple as essentially clicking and dragging and dropping it over. By that, it takes you through a wizard style design. where you fill out a couple of properties, define some parameters, and you hit add and load, and then you go from your source into your actual data warehouse, where in this case we're bringing in authors. You have the ability to come in here and see that data for itself. Now, that's all great and dandy. Load tables are meant to be temporary, so you normally load them with data. Typically, you load them with data, and then next time you want to go and bring in some more data, you truncate that information, and you load it back in. And that's when we go to our next set, which is part of our staging table. Now, our staging table allows us to bring in data from all of those different load tables to create our final data set that we would use. Now, again, this is our staging area for it as well. And as you can see, what I've done here is I've brought in information from all of our other information. If we look at our books is ultimately our main table that we're essentially querying from, and contains hundreds of thousands of records of different styled books, published IDs, titles, descriptions, the price, the published dates, all that kind of information, and ultimately having those IDs itself. And as you can see, if we were to look at the data from that book, that main book set, it has a bunch of IDs, which means nothing really to us at this point. So we want to denormalize that to get us to a more readable, humanly readable data set that gives us into our staging table. And as you can see, we are still bringing in the IDs. As you'll see, we'll get rid of that a little bit later on. But this gives us the ability to tap into the titles and the authors, the categories and subcategories, which will all be super necessary when we do create those Cortex service on top of it. And all of this was done through dragging and dropping, setting information through the metadata. You have the ability to come in here, click on each of these individual columns. It gives us information about what the data types are. We can change it here. We can add transformations should we want to. And we can do a lot of really, really cool stuff, all without having to touch SQL or Python code. It automatically and dynamically generates the logic underneath the hood in order to get us to this data set itself. And so we have the ability to run this by executing an update script. Or if it's a load table, we can load the data. Now, obviously, this is very tedious and manual work. If you have many, many tables that have a very specific order of doing things, that is why we couple our product with an internal scheduler and orchestration system. And through this orchestration system, we have the ability to then create. Once we got it into our, back to our diagram. Once we've brought in all of our data into our load, we throw it into our staging table, which we've just talked about. And just to show you as well, really, really quickly while we still have the time, if we come in here to our, this allows us to edit the properties of our stage table itself. And we have the ability to do a lot of really cool features, such as how do we want to handle deleting? Do we want to truncate the table before we before we load up information into the staging table? Truncate is by the default standard. You can add no, you do yes. If you have yes, you can have a customized delete where clause, whatever the case may be. But for today's purposes, we're going to be truncating that. Here's where you set some of the business key columns that allows us to, and all of this is metadata that is stored within RED that it actually propagates as you build out this thing. So at the end of the day, since this is a metadata-driven tool, the more metadata you have, whether it reads it from the sources themselves or you add it yourself, the easier the automation process will be for you in the process. And also by physically dragging and dropping these columns into our table, as you can see, we'll do today. I've already done this already, but just to show you, you can have a column that is attached to our source system. Another thing that we can do in order to just showcase how easy it is to be able to bring in multiple tables is right now I'm connected to our source, which we don't want to. We want to be connected to our data warehouse. And here we are connected to our Snowflake main instance. And you'll see I have a lot of schemas here. And there's the source books. It's technically all in the same instance. So we're going to ignore that for now. But we are going to be tapping into our bronze layer. It follows very similar to a medallion architecture. And go back to our main staging table. And say I want to bring over in the authors. Now here's our author ID. We can drag and drop this column in here. Now it is going to complain because I have already done it. It's going to complain that we already have one. But for simplicity here, you can give it a different name, or obviously that wouldn't be a complaint. if it wasn't there in the first place. And as you can see, it already pre-populates a lot of the information that we got from that load table itself. For example, of where that table is coming from, the data type, the column name, and then also what it does behind the scenes is if you've set up your business keys appropriately or it reads from it, it's able to identify that and create the joins for you automatically, which I'm going to remove this because I've obviously already brought it in. And that also gives you finite control should you want a little bit more customization out of the box to be able to go in here and see how all of these sources are indeed joined together. And this gives you a nice GUI-like relationship or GUI-like wizard to be able to show that our main primary table is indeed, in this case, books. We are bringing in all of these other information or all these other tables. We can define what sort of joins they are, whether it's a left inner type join, and we have these nice little diagrams to be able to pull everything together and show this is how they are indeed created. Once you're satisfied with how all of that looks, you process it, and then you get the final data set as we see here. Now, we've only gone part way through what we need to do because ultimately we started from data that is very raw, and we have now combined it into a data set that we can now refine even further to get to our final data set that will be used to create the Cortex service on top of it. And there you can see all of our data. We have quite a lot of information in here. This just gives you a portion of it. Obviously, if you have millions and billions of rows, you do not want all that information transmitted through the network into our program itself. That is unnecessary. So this gives you a nice little snippet of what's going on. But then finally, as we'll go back to our diagram, ultimately at the end of the day, we throw this into a data store. I have created a data store for this, and I have set it up in such a way that it's just a simple insert and update. So any sort of information that changes over time, it updates existing records and or inserts new ones. So once we have that, we can come out here and just kind of do some sanity checks. As you can see, by doing everything within RED, creating the tables, processing, obviously that information exists within Snowflake itself. And this is my Snowflake instance, which happens to be right there. And just for some sanity checks, right, I can come in here and run some raw queries. And as you can see, this is the exact same information as what you would have seen within RED itself. And that just gives me a good sanity test that everything works as it should. The data is as it wants, is where you can have your validation. Now, when it comes to creating Cortex services, we can go back into our RED and actually do that ourselves. Now, this program RED is built off of, or really is powered by what we call templates. Templates is what we define how to dynamically generate whatever we need to do, whether that's processing data, inserting tables, creating dynamic DDLs. And obviously, when creating Cortex services, it is essentially really just a DDL type statement. So we're able to abstract that and base that off of the metadata itself, which allows us in turn to create objects which represents a Cortex service. And at the end of the day, what we have here is essentially just creating a service is really quite standard, in the sense that it is a create Cortex service. You give it some parameters, and then you give it the query upon which to create that service on top of. And all what we've done here is from our main DS, and by the way, I'm going to do it this way right here, is I'm going to show you I've created yet another data store that will be the primary candidate for our service itself. And I'm calling that the Cortex books chunks. And to show how that relationship looked like, I'm going to show you a track back diagram. And so this should look fairly similar to the one that we've seen before, except it only ended here. What I've done from this point on is I've then since created an additional staging table called the staged Cortex books chunks, and then did some things to that table, which I'll show you, and then pumped that end result into its final data store, which I've called the Cortex books chunks table, which we will use to create the service. Now, exactly what have I done what additions have I done? And really, I have, as you can see, between the differences between the data set where it came from, which included a lot of columns, I have significantly cut down on that, but I have also added an additional column here called chunk. And now this is what the LLM, the Cortex Search service, is going to be utilizing to create its internal memory and be able to, for us to be able to ask it questions, very similar to how you've asked ChatGPT today, Grok, Gemini, whatever the case may be. And we can see here, there it is a transformation that we have taken from all of the existing columns and has done some stuff to it. For example, we do have a chunk value, which you can see here is our, excuse me, we have, if we come in here and look at our, oops, we look at our source. This is some Snowflake-specific language that allows us to laterally flatten and do some Snowflake Cortex stuff that will allow us to tokenize and get that specific column in a certain format that is required by Cortex's service to be able to ingest it and create that AI bot chatbot on top of it. And that is where that chunk value column comes from. Because Snowflake is just great in general, that allows us to reference that chunk value dynamically generated column within one of our columns itself, and that's where we have it. But ultimately, we have, well, at the end of the day, what we end up having, and it's going to look a little bit better in Snowsight, so I'm going to go back to here. But ultimately, from that staging table, I've dumped it into a data store, which has exactly the same information. And really, our chunks information looks like this, where we have our title, our authors, our category, our price, publish date, and the description for it in a format that is required by Cortex Search service. And that allows us then to create those service Cortex book chunks by essentially creating a new object here, and we can create multiple Cortex services depending on the power, the horsepower of your Snowflake instance. Creating these services can vary on time depending on a variety of factors such as how big your data is, how powerful your instance or your warehouse is. Specifically for this, we are running on a fairly small warehouse, and this took me about 45 minutes to create Snowflake. It took Snowflake 45 minutes to create on a data set that was roughly about 1.5 million rows. So there's a lot of data in here, which we'll see later on. But ultimately, that really concludes the RED portion aspect, right? So through RED itself, we were able to ingest multiple tables of source or multiple tables from a source, put it all together into a staging table, throw it into a data store, which from that data store, I was able to create yet another working table or a staging table and get it precisely into the format that will eventually be used to create the Cortex Search service. Once I got into that form, I then again used RED itself to create that Cortex service. And once that service has been created, we can visually do it. I like to do sanity checks. And what this allows me to do is come in here, search for my database, just right over here, come into our public, and you should see here is our Cortex Search service that we have indeed created. And just like with both in RED, you have the ability to use RED to manage, see some stuff that you need to, but you also have the flexibility of going into Snowflake itself and seeing the result of your action. And at the end of the day, you can see that this is the definition or essentially the query that is being used to create the search service on top of it. And there it is. Nothing complex, nothing crazy, but it uses that nonetheless. Now, once we have it in here, we can actually shift our focus from RED back to Snowflake to show you the Streamlit application. Now, to create a Streamlit, I'm not going to, like I said, I have added, we are going to add the material for the code that generates this interface in our virtual tour at the landing page. So feel free to download it and customize it, take it for a spin for yourself. But ultimately, creating a Streamlit application is really, really simple. You log into Snowsight, into your home dashboard under projects, Streamlit, creating the new Streamlit app. And once you do so, you go through a wizard-style series, and it brings you to this. Well, this is already edited, so let me show you what the code actually looks like. Again, this is Python code, so you will need to come in here if you're trying this on your own. You will need to come in here to the packages portion, and you need to add Snowflake. Make sure to add that, otherwise this app will not run and will complain about a missing module. And this actually gives you the ability to choose, once we do this chat, the chat bot, essentially, we have an ability to choose from a variety of models to fine tune and have what we'd like. But essentially, this code is really just computed together to be able to query into the service and then create it, from what you see here, a very, very nice interface that shows us the actual UI itself. Now, this is, again, using this search service, the Cortex's AI search service that is on top of that data store that we've originally created, which is, again, just a big old data set of a bunch of books. And here you have, in our example, we have the ability to choose the service. So if you had indeed multiple services that you have managed, you can essentially use the same Streamlit application to choose between the different services and talk to your data. So you don't have to have one Streamlit app per service that you've created. You have the ability to include chat history, got some advanced options here by selecting different language models. If you want to, we're going to just stick with Mistral Large. And this gives you some metadata information about the session state. But let's actually see this thing in action. So, WhereScape Virtual Tour, chat with your data. You know, I'm a big Harry Potter's fan. I like Harry Potter, have been since I was a kid. And, you know, and using our data set today, I wanted to say, maybe, you know, I am a big fan of Harry Potter. What other books would you recommend? And just like in a very ChatGPT familiar interface, this is now tapping into the data set that we have created. And it's saying, hey, you know, I would recommend Harry Potter. You're the best. A tribute from fans the world over is a book collection of letters from fans around the world, sharing your thoughts and opinions. That's great. So what about, I also like action books. Give me your top 5 recommendations. And as you can see, based off of the action books that it's recommended, it has recommended based off my data set that I have provided. Looks like you might like the Maze Runner books because it's not very far off, because I do actually like that series. And looks like also the Eye of Mines. So really, at the end of the day, this was a very, very quick overall virtual tour of not only our tool of how to quickly get data in from a source, being able to throw it all together and being able to iterate on it super quickly, depending on whatever you need to do to get it into a state that can be ingested into Snowflake's Cortex AI. And then once we have that service, we can expand that functionality even further by creating a Streamlit app that allows us to create this fancy, nice, user-friendly UI that allows us to then talk to our data. Now, this was a very silly example at the end of the day, but as you can imagine, in a much more realistic situation, this can be expanded to more enterprise-level information such as operations, sales, marketing. And this gives end users the ability to, maybe this can be coupled with Power BI dashboards or Tableau dashboards, not only to have pretty pictures, to be able to see insights and data analytics, but have a chat functionality right alongside it for you to start asking questions about your data, such as, what is the most profitable quarter of the last 10 years? Maybe why was it the most profitable? And it can tap into that information that is a little bit more flexible and human-like than simply just looking at very static numerical type data. So honestly, at the end of the day, I really, really hope that this was insightful. It was high enough to get, it was a high level enough to get not too much into the weeds, but get your curiosity piqued about what our tools are capable of doing. Again, the material covered in this will be provided on the landing page of our virtual tour. You are more than welcome to download it and try it out for yourself. Again, please reach out to us if you would like a more in-depth demo we can provide. We're more than happy to do that. And also attend. We regularly host hands-on labs. We can see exactly everything that I showed you today. We take it a little bit more granular to show you exactly how we did it, and and why, how we did it, as well as we give out demos periodically. We also have webinars, and if all else fails, reach out to us directly, and we're more than happy to work with you one-on-one. Again, thank you very much for attending this virtual tour. Hope this was insightful, and until next time.